Good day. In our attempt to fight with the drug menace, information has a vital role in helping eradicate this global threat. Today, we are going to tackle about drug addiction, drug dependence, and other addictions. Epidemiology. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes World Drug Report 2016, 29 million suffers from drug use disorders. 1.6 million people who inject drugs are living with HIV. Harmful use of alcohol is contributory to more than 200 diseases and injury conditions, alcohol dependence, liver cirrhosis, cancers, and injuries. In 2012, approximately 3.3 million deaths, or 5.9% of all global deaths, were attributable to alcohol consumption. In the national data, the profile of drug abusers are of age 30 years old, ratio of male to female of 13.1, mostly single and unemployed, with an educational attainment of college level and an average monthly income of $15,671. They are mostly living in urban area, specifically in the NCR region. The duration of drug taking is more than 6 years, and usually they are poly-drug users. Their drug substance use includes methamphetamine hydrochloride or shabu, cannabis or marijuana, inhalants or the contact cement adhesives. Further, 4.8 million Filipinos has tried illegal drugs at least once. However, the detection rate of methamphetamine is only 28%. More than 8,000 barangays in the country are plagued with the drug menace. Metro Manila has the highest rate of being drug affected, with 92.10% of the region's barangays affected, followed by the Region 4A Southern Tagalog at 33.78%. In response, 42 DOH accredited rehabilitation facilities have been established, 15 government and 27 privately owned. What is drug addiction then? Drug addiction is a chronic relapsing brain disease that is characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite harmful consequences. It is considered a brain disease because drugs change the brain. They change the structure and how it works. It is a compulsive and maladaptive dependence on a drug or substance that produces psychological, physical, economic, social, or legal ramifications.
Addiction was thought to only affect moral wrongdoers or those that are weak-willed, but addiction is much more. The pervasive nature of addiction penetrates the lives of the poor and the rich, the successful and unsuccessful. Medical doctors, as well as homeless transients, become easily addicted. And some people become addicted to heroin, while others become addicted to snack foods and sweets. This is because addictions are really chemical addictions inside the brain. Addiction boosts chemicals in the brain by activating the limbic reward center. This limbic reward center is very powerful in directing behavior because it is denser than other brain structures. It developed before other brain structures, and it works largely at a subconscious level. Addictive behavior such as drug taking activates this motivational incentive system in the brain that is associated with a species survival. This is also the same area that is tied to the autonomic nervous system. It is activated when we step outside in freezing temperatures and our bodies begin to shiver. We do not consciously control these things, they just happen. Scientists know that addiction is not just a mental or moral weakness, but has biochemical roots that throw off the homeostatic state of the brain. When dopamine, a brain chemical, spikes at dramatic levels, it starts to hijack other parts of the brain. As a result, addicts start to value the emotional payoff of their drug of choice over the perceived negative consequences. The brain is really a multiple structured system in which different structures fight against each other for dominance, and for the brain to operate properly, it must be at balance. Addictive behaviors work on the emotional system, while the rational brain structure competes to warn the individual of the consequences of such behaviors. This explains why many addicts feel as if there's a different part to them, a part that wants to quit while another part strongly urges them to continue. Ambivalence is a common feeling for those who are addicted. Family members often describe their loved one as a Mr. Jekyll and a Dr. Hyde, because their drug-taking behavior has become priority, and as a result they may act erratic and unpredictable. Loved ones may lie, cheat, and steal to hide and maintain their drug using. This is a result of the addicted brain. Instead of viewing addicted individuals as moral wrongdoers, understanding that an addict often has a biochemical imbalance that can be corrected, this brings hope. One example, Dr. Gant, who was a medical director of Tule Hill Hospital, reported 83% success rate in treating people with addictions by addressing the biochemical deficiencies that they had. Dr. Gant and colleagues showed that certain nutrients can restore the brain that continues to fuel addiction. Once it is fixed, behavior improves.
What are the common causes of drug addiction? These are mental health issues, primarily depression, and other medical health issues, sociocultural influences or acceptance, financial burdens, unemployment, access trading activities, curiosity, experimentation, and peer pressure. The common consequences of drug addiction include crime, sexual physical assault, health problems such as the HIV, AIDS, and Hep B, broken family and relationships, alienation, and unproductive society.
This may be your brain on drugs, but what actually happens in the mind of someone addicted to drugs? It all starts with the brain, specifically something called the reward center. One of the brain's goals is to keep our physical bodies alive and reproducing. So when we do something good for our survival, like eating delicious food or having sex, our brains produce chemicals that make us feel good. These chemicals are called neurotransmitters, and they're basically the way our brain and body communicate with each other. The brain produces hundreds of neurotransmitters, but when it comes to addiction, the most important one is called dopamine. Dopamine makes us feel good, so we want to do that thing again and again. Basically, our brain is training us like we'd train a new puppy. But learning doesn't always go the way it's supposed to. Substances like heroin or other addictive drugs are the jackpot of the dopamine world. Not only do they produce more dopamine than other activities, they make your brain think that the reward is even better than you remembered. So just like that puppy who wants to sit and get a tasty treat, you want to do more drugs to get that good feeling. Over time, drug use can also change other parts of the brain. Some connections, like the ones related to impulsive behavior and emotional responses, get stronger, and others, like those used in decision-making, get weaker. Those changes can also cause physical dependencies. If you've ever gotten a headache from giving up your morning coffee, you've had a minor experience of what it's like to go through withdrawal. Withdrawing from more serious drugs like alcohol or heroin can cause breathing problems, irregular heart rate, and seizures. Of course, everyone reacts to different drugs in different ways. Lots of people binge drink in college, but most of them won't become alcoholics, and scientists are still trying to figure out why.
Now, it's time to know who are the drug addicts. There are 5 most common behavior traits of an addict. First, they lie. They have to tell lies to mislead people about where they were when they were really out buying or using drugs or even alcohol. The more they feel they need drugs, the more likely they are to feel the need to lie. They will never admit that they do drugs or they are addicted to it. The least they will admit is that they are just users, not addicted. Second, they manipulate. The family and close friends of an addicted person really want him to thrive and be happy and encourage him to make good decisions, but the addicted person is on a destructive track. The lure of the drugs is so powerful, he feels he needs the drugs to function, to be able to get through another day, not to get desperately sick from withdrawal. He manipulates those who love him the most. Drugs like shabu can change a person who was loving and open with his family into someone who has to manipulate everyone so they will let him keep using the drugs. Third, they are very likely to be engaged in criminal acts. Although not true of every addict, it is a typical pattern for a person who has been addicted for a considerable time. Eventually, their funds runs out. They have pawned or sold everything of value. They owe friends and family money. There are no more assets, but the drugs have to be obtained. Crime starts here. They become more aggressive, paranoid, and violent, resulting to assault or domestic violence charges. Unfortunately, some drugs like shabu depletes the person's sense of self-respect that he or she will turn to prostitution or any degraded activity that will score them their next hit. Fourth, an addict is very likely to become abusive. It's tragic that an addict's blame can even take a violent and abusive form. With the delusional thinking common to most addicts, he can perceive those around him as being threatening, dangerous, or malicious. As he shifts the blame, he may physically, mentally, or emotionally attack those he blames. The spouse of an addict very often bears the brunt of both the blame and the abuse. Of course, physical violence is a very real possibility, especially toward spouses, children, elderly parents, particularly those people who cannot fight back. Fifth and last, an addict will shift the blame. Irresponsibility is the name of the game for an addict. Everything is blamed to outside self. Whatever happens is never his fault.
When you try to quit an addiction, your brain goes into a panic. You try your very hardest to quit your addiction, but you find that you still need that cigarette or drink. There is a reason why you find yourself dealing with strong cravings when you are attempting to quit. Addiction exploits the mechanisms our brain has developed to enable us to survive. The brain actually thinks it needs it. We live in a day of plenty, and the getting is always good. Our ancient ancestors did not live during a time where abundant rewards such as food was immediately available, nor did they live in an age where junk food is scientifically modified to be the most palatable. The widely available and abundant sources of junk food, porn, credit cards, and chemical substances at our disposal tells our brain that the getting is good, explaining why our natural inclination is to overeat, overuse, overspend, and overdrink. If you abruptly try to quit your addiction, your brain will go into a frenzied state. Abruptly quitting evokes your brain to make a last-ditch effort for your drug of choice. This is largely because conditioning has occurred. If you want to know how to stop addiction in its tracks, you must learn this key element. Conditioning is the shaping of an organism's behavior through environmental interaction. B.F. Skinner, a behavioral psychologist, demonstrated this principle. When experimenting with animals, he built up a chain of behaviors through reinforcement. This is how dolphins at SeaWorld are trained to swim around the tank and jump through hoops in a complex behavior to get a treat. And in some experiments, some animals will press a lever several hundred times for just one single dose of their drug. Addicts are continually conditioned to obtain their drug of choice. And in some cases, an addict will go through a lot of work to get it. For example, when a smoker realizes that he must run to the gas station to get that cigarette, this requires him to complete a complicated sequence of behaviors as well. He has to put on his coat, then his shoes, locate his wallet and keys. He walks outside, hops into his car, and drives 5 miles. The addict goes through this whole process to ensure that he has his drug of choice. But if the drug is no longer available, and if both humans and animals are no longer rewarded for their behavior, then they stop engaging in it. This is called extinction. Extinction is when a reward is removed. During this time, an extinction burst happens. An extinction burst is a temporary increase of behavioral responses in an effort to get that reward. For example, parents are often told to ignore their kids when they cry. When a child cries in his crib, the mother's natural inclination is to go and hold the child and comfort him. What this does is strengthens the child's probability of crying in the future. But when a parent abruptly stops giving in to the child's attention, their cries become loudest. This is because they are going through an extinction burst. The parents know that it is best for the child, but the child's heart-wrenching cries and screams for attention are extremely difficult to ignore. Similarly, when you try to break your pattern of addiction, this is when your brain's urges and cravings become the loudest. Like the child, your brain wants to have a tantrum. You may get seemingly uncontrollable and intrusive thoughts and urges to use your drug. You may want to pull your hair out, slam doors, or kick the neighbor's cat. But just you wait, everything will be fine, because you are experiencing an extinction burst.
So how do we help addicted persons? First, there should be a strong family support, adequate community understanding, behavioral modification, personal development or employment, and importantly, the mindset shift. There are various forms of addiction, and the most common is the chemical or drug addiction, usually associated with methamphetamine or shabu, cannabis or marijuana, opioids, medical-related drugs such as clonazepam and other used drugs for people with illnesses, and adhesive cement inhalants. The second is the internet addiction. It is the inability to control his or her use of the internet, eventually causing psychological, social, and/or work difficulties. The third is the food addiction. Obesity is a pressing global public health concern and the second leading preventable cause of death. Sugar, fat, salt, flavoring agents, preservatives, flavoring, and high fructose corn syrup causes the addictive properties similar to stimulants. Fourth is sexual addiction. Contrary to enjoying sex as self-affirming source of physical pleasure, the sex addict has learned to rely on sex for comfort from pain, nurturing, or relief from stress and others, the way an alcoholic relies on alcohol. The fifth is the gambling addiction. Placing something of value at risk in the hopes of gaining something of greater value is a characteristic of gambling addiction. This addiction comes from the feeling of pleasure and reward he gets from taking risks. Sixth and finally is the social media addiction. Internet, computer games, web surfing, online shopping, online pornography, and online dating sites all involves the social media addiction. So how do we promote change and how addicts can do change? The stages of change offer an integrative framework for understanding how people change and the ways treatment providers can facilitate that change. There are 5 stages of change. The first stage is the pre-contemplation stage. It involves an addict who does not think of quitting. He feels that things are fine and he do not see any problem. The second stage is contemplation. An addict thinks of quitting, wonders how he affects others, and may be trying small changes. The third is the preparation stage. It involves an addict who has a plan to quit and may have cut down using drugs and can see benefits of quitting. And the fourth stage is the action stage. It involves an addict who have quit using drugs and has avoided the triggers and have asked others for support. And finally is the maintenance stage, or those addicted persons who has no use of drugs for a long time and has accepted himself and starts to help others who are still using drugs. Addiction is a brain disease, and the victims are the addicts. They are calling for help. We need to take action to help them rebuild themselves and transform to a productive member of our community.
At this point, we have come to our question and answer portion, and together with me are my two co-residents, Dr. Raisa R. Jumaani and Dr. Sherhalin A. Mukaram, also our Duterte Program point person. Today we have two guests who will be asking a question.
After viewing from the presentation, I wonder on how can we prevent, or what are the preventive measures for our young people of today not to be involved in the illegal activities.
Earlier on, we have discussed the risk factors for them to be involved in illegal activities. And the most important thing for them to prevent to go through these illegal activities is to have a good family support at home. Everything that comes at home will eventually help them be a better person and have a good influence to their friends. So it is very important to have a good home relationship and relationship with the families. How about you?
Well, aside from the good family support, they could also engage in different activities like sports, so that they would not dwell on the illegal activities that some of the friends that are having. So good sports activity is one way of be able to prevent drug addiction.
Another thing is it's also really important to involve our youth in religious any religious activities or any religious movement such as the Silsilah, wherein they will be taught about the importance of religion in or faith in our lives as at an earlier stage.
Okay, doctor.
Yes.
Love the presentation.
Thank you.
And so, while I was listening to the presentation, and basically it tackled mostly on drugs, but also I wanted to ask a little extra for the viewers back at home, or in this presentation, I'm sorry. Aside from drug addiction, I'd like to talk about, maybe you could shed some light on two common yet rampant addictions in today. People could hardly see it as a threat, but since you mentioned it in your presentation, social media addiction, and the other one is gaming addiction. Now my question would be, for everyone who is listening, how does this addiction lead into a destructive path? Because most people would rather defend it as a hobby, yet as we see in social media, you have the selfie mentality where people start taking selfies almost every day, and including gaming addiction. One rampant addiction would be students leaving school to become professional gamers, and it has been funded for almost 3 years now. So could you shed some light? How, as a parent, how would we determine that our child is already on a destructive path and we can just let it slide? Okay, it's a hobby for it.
Okay. First and foremost, anything that becomes addiction, it usually involves the activation of the pleasure center of the brain. When this is activated, the person gets to be hooked on the activity. However, this hooked activity will only be identified as a hobby if it is done in a recreational way. Meaning to say, the daily activities, the relationship, the functionality, the cognition of the person is not affected, as well as they are able to function well. They are not disabled from their daily activities. That's the time that we can say that it's just a hobby. Now, when it becomes an addiction, the pleasure center of the brain is overly activated. They seek that pleasure. The brain gets hooked to that memory that tells the person, hey, that time you went to the computer, you felt so good. It's like as if time just didn't matter. And that time, and so on, that would become a habit. From a habit, it will become destructive from the relationship, from their daily activities. So that's the time it becomes addiction.
And follow-up question, how would you advise this to the parents who are listening in this presentation?
Okay. Just like in any kind of addiction or in any kind of disorder, especially in the younger ones, a limit setting is very important. Meaning, parents will set a limit on how long they can use the internet or the computer and how long they can play the games. So that is very important. So they have parents and their children should have make a compromise wherein they will have to talk. Okay, it's very important to have an open communication with our children, no? Especially if a teenager, because those times the very tumultuous, tama ba? Yeah, the time of their lives. So it's very important to have open communications, and for those who are hooked in gaming, the parent must have the authority and they must have make a compromise with the children, not just asking them without any compromise is very risky, because you're putting them they will feel that they are controlled. So it is better if you make parents and their children make a compromise, or they have to limit for how long they can use the internet. For example, 3 hours in a day, or they can only play game if there's no school, etc. That's the best way to help our younger generation.
So does that mean that parents who don't make a compromise with their kids, would that lead to certain situations like a child finds a good friend and they decide to skip school to play in computer shop? Or does the same functions of an addict, example, they lie to get that gratification, same as drug addiction, will that apply to the other addictions as well?
Yes. What Dr. Advius tackled a while ago on the risk behaviors of the drug addicts, it also applies to other kinds of addiction. They lie, they manipulate, they go to an extent that they would not think of any harm that would come to themselves, as long as they could be able to achieve or get what they want. So without thinking.
So actually, it's still part of the unconscious feeling of pleasure, the gratification. It becomes a behavioral addiction. It may not be like chemical induced addiction, but a behavioral addiction. You may mention earlier about kids going to computer shops and they are being paid. Actually, it's a combination of a behavioral addiction of gaming, at the same time gambling. So it could be a very tumultuous scenario, because the thing is, it's not only contained as a computer addiction, but it may also go beyond that and become a gambling addiction.
Okay. Lastly, to end my question, my last question would be, since I already asked how a person, well, how do you define an addict, or how do you detect an addict? But my question now is more on the personal side. Me, for example, as a person, I think I'm well put together, I assume. And of course, there will be times when I will deny. Now, when do I stop the denial and say, my goodness, I am an addict? Not necessarily a chemically induced addict, but different forms of addict. A selfie addict, a gaming addict, like that. So, are there any markers for us to be aware of that us in our own little way, we could say we're addicted to something and it's time to put the brakes?
You have to be mindful. Everyone, I'm urging you to be mindful of your behavior, of your relationships, and your ability to sustain your daily activities. If that is affected, if you have a tumultuous relationship with your friends, families, if your work is going on a downhill manner, then perhaps you have to reevaluate yourself. From reevaluating, even in terms of addiction, we have this what we call the flash of insight. We have this flash of insight where you realize, hey, I think I'm not doing good already. That flash of insight could be an opportunity for us to help you, and you yourself to ask help. Now, for all the family members, if that person or your kid or your family member will tell you, I need help, grab that opportunity, because that is that could be the only way, no? For us to help them.
Okay, Doctor, thank you very much.
My last question, Doctor, is what can you recommend to these young people who are drug dependents?
I think aside from seeking professional help, it is advisable to get involved with friends who are so how do we call it?
Good influence.
Good influence, and get into a sports activities or any kind of activities that you love or you enjoy, and as much as possible, how do we say that? It's not only the parents who need to work on the relationship, but also the children. They all have to contribute. So, as long as their relationship in the family is okay, nothing to worry about drugs.
At the same time, be informed. There's so many things that has been going on in our country that tells us what is addiction, what is this all about, how do we get involved, how to help other people. Now, by being informed or by having this information at hand, we can help ourselves but also other people. So we need to be informed, we need to be concerned, because it is not only a problem by one country, this is a global problem. So we are urging everyone to help each other, to be part in this war, in this fight against drug addiction, and also its other forms of addiction and its consequences.
Okay, Doc. Thank you.
Thank you.